Don't play with the fire, the locals in Romania used to say. I never understood it at first, although I knew they were very superstitious people. I am a construction engineer and have been recently sent to Romania with the company for the big contract we won, the construction of 27 floors building of business offices. I arrived at Bucharest Friday, and the project was set to begin Monday, so I had the weekend for myself. I wanted to visit the city, have some fun, since it was my first time in Romania, but I didn't know anyone. My colleague, Kevin, was going to arrive on Saturday, and the other members of the team had the flights booked on Sunday. It was 6 p.m. I was in my hotel room when the phone rang. It was Kevin. Hey man, how is it there? Tell me the first impression. Hi Kev, I don't really know yet. I mean, the city looks nice, but I haven't been anywhere yet. Still in this room. I wish I knew someone to go out with tonight. Have a couple of beers. But I guess I have to wait for you tomorrow. I don't like going out alone. Why don't you hang out with some locals? Kevin asked. And how would I do that? Go to random strangers and ask them to hang out with me. I laughed. Try the local Reddit. Go and create a post and say you are new in town and if there's anyone who wants to go out tonight for a beer or something. That's a good idea, Kev. I think I'll do that. I'll test the beer for you, and tomorrow, when we go out, I'll know which one is good. Do that, man. Look, I gotta go. See you tomorrow. Bye, Kev. I got off the phone, opened my laptop, and headed on Reddit. I created a post. Hello, everyone. I just arrived for the first time in Bucharest. I was wondering if there's anyone willing to show me around, go out for a beer. P.S. I don't speak Romanian, so it would be nice if you speak English. A few replies came, welcoming me to the city, wishing me a pleasant stay, and stuff like that. And then the following reply came. Hi man, we are a bunch of Reddit friends who frequently go out for a beer. And we actually have a scheduled meeting tonight. You could join us if you like. DM me for more details. I clicked on the poster account, reviewed it a bit, and I found out that was a guy mostly interested in cats, technology, and cooking. I sent him a DM telling him I'd like to join them and to give me some details about where we are going and when to meet. He responded with the name of a bar, which looked pretty nice from the Google photos, and to be there outside at 9 p.m., then sent me his phone number. It was already 7:30 p.m. by now, so I jumped in the shower, got dressed, and called an Uber. I reached the location 10 minutes earlier, and I saw 5 guys around their 20s waiting outside. I took my phone and called the number he sent me. Then I saw one of the guys picking up his phone and answering. I'm here. I think I see you. I said, a bit confused because this could have also been just a coincidence of timing and phone calls. He looked around, fixed in on me, and said, Yeah, that's us. Come over. I've always been an extrovert. However, meeting a new group of foreign guys made me feel a little nervous. I walked towards them. Hi guys, I'm Ross. Nice to meet you. Hey Ross, I'm Andre, the guy I spoke with on the phone said. Then he pointed his fingers to the other guys and said, This is Miha, Dan, Angelo, and Bogdan. We headed inside, got ourselves a table, and ordered some beers. The guys seemed curious about me and made me feel like the center of attention, but not in an awkward way. I found out they were all students from different colleges, and they all met up on local Reddit some years ago and became friends. Angelo was studying to become a doctor. Miha was passionate about music, and he had 2 rap songs already. Bogdan was a very dedicated gamer, which made him skip most of his classes and had to repeat the last year of the college. This made me laugh. Dan was trying to become a bodybuilder, and that was a visible thing. I told them about myself, what I do for a living, about the project we were about to start in Bucharest, and about my passion for horror. Well, if you like horror, we have a haunted lake here, close to Bucharest. It's called the Witch's Pond. Angelo said after a short pause. He continued, It is said that at night witches are casting spells If you go there, bad things will happen. Not even the animals are drinking from it. No, really. I've always been excited about stories with haunted places, but never got the chance to visit one. So where is it exactly? I asked. You want to go there? Bogdan asked. Andrei chuckled and put his beer on the table and said, It's about 15 kilometers outside of Bucharest, located in the middle of a forest. If I think about it, we lived our whole lives here, but never thought of going there. What do you guys think? Should we go for it after we finish these beers? My first thought was not to go in the forest outside of Bucharest with some guys I just met 2 hours ago. But after a bit of consideration, these guys looked nice and harmless. I didn't feel any threat around them. Plus, I always wanted to visit a haunted place. Let's do it, I said firmly. The alcohol starting to kick in by this moment. Should we call an Uber? Or how do we reach there? Yes, let's go. It would be fun, Bogdan said, and everyone agreed. Let's pay the bill and call for an Uber. We paid for the beers, went outside while Bogdan was on the Uber app, trying to set the destination point to the Witch's Pond as close as possible. He had to do it manually since there was no exact address. The Uber will be here in 3 minutes, guys. I requested for 2 cars since we are 6, Bogdan said. It was dark, and I felt so excited for what I was going to do. My whole life was monotonous. Work, home, occasional nights out, but for the first time in my life, I was going to do something like this. Something I've always wanted. I felt the adrenaline rushing through my body. The cars arrived, and I got in with Andrei and Angelo, while Bogdan and Miha and Dan got in the second car. The Uber driver looked a bit suspicious and frightened when he saw the destination point. And while noticing this, Andrei assured him we are only some drunk guys trying to have some fun and visit the said haunted place, and he doesn't need to worry about it. We arrived after 20 minutes and got out of the car. It was pitch black, and the headlights were the only source of light out there. The second car arrived 1 minute later, being delayed due to catching a red light behind us. We all gathered and turned on our phone flashlights. Miha said we should enter the forest from the other side of the road and walk straight for 2 minutes. Then we should reach the Witch's Pond. At least that's what Google says. It was cold outside, and a very deep silence, the type of silence that doesn't feel right. Miha went first. We followed. We climbed a small cliff and entered the forest. We made our way to the Witch's Pond. Walking over dead branches and leaves brought a bit of sound in the deep dead silence we were surrounded of. After about 1 minute of walking through the forest, the wind started to blow and all of a sudden Miha screams, "Holy fuck, guys. Stop. It's a dead deer over there." A strong, rotten smell hit me. I wanted to puke. The wind was now blowing the smell right towards us. We bypassed it, holding our breaths, and while I got next to it, I took a glance at the deer. Something was off. It didn't look like she'd died from an animal attack, or being shot by some hunter, and no visible wounds. And even if it smelled so bad, it didn't look like it was decomposing yet. I got down on my knees and saw her eyes, wide open, and the marks of blood poured out of her eyes. I put my hand on her neck, and that's when I was shocked. It was still warm. Her whole body was still warm. I couldn't understand why there was already a smell present if the deer just died before. Now I'm thinking it's another body, and the smell is not coming from this deer. So I took a breath of air. That previous smell was 10 times stronger now, and I cannot explain what I felt. I can only say that it was the most awful feeling I've ever felt. At the beginning, I felt a strong nausea, followed by a feeling of terror. I wanted to leave, but now my legs were weak, and I felt like I couldn't stand up. My vision started to get blurry, and before I knew it, Andrei grabbed my arm and helped me to stand up. "What are you still doing here, man? I had to come back for you." We didn't even notice when you were left behind. How could you stay in this smell? He asked. There's something very wrong with this deer, Andre, I said. Even if it smells like it was decomposing for a few days. It just died. I put my hand on her body and it's still warm. That's impossible, man. Your mind is playing tricks. There's no way that her body is still warm. You felt that rotten smell. It has at least 3 days since she died, Andre replied, with a bit of worry in his face at that moment. Let's go. The boys are waiting for us, he continued. We headed back to the group and kept going forward. The air started to feel heavy, and the cold was getting colder, with how much we advanced towards the pond. We reached a zone where the trees stopped, and found ourselves in a small circular area, with a pond in the center. The vegetation seemed dead all over the place. The pond had a greenish color, the color of a sick water. The whole place looked so unnatural. I turned off the light of my phone, opened the camera, and took a picture of it. It was my first visit to a haunted place, so I had to have a memory of it. So no witches here, Angelo said. Miha, take a picture of me in front of the lake. Angelo headed towards the lake and sat with his back at it. You are too close. Go a bit more near the lake, Miha said. Angelo took a few steps behind and stepped on a moist piece of mud. Scared he stepped too far and landed in the water. Well, fuck. Now my feet are not only muddy, but also wet. Angelo had a fury expression on his face while getting out of the pond, shaking his feet, which were pouring water. And by the look of that water, you're going to stink as well, I said. I'm not sharing the Uber with you on the way back, I chuckled. By that time, he didn't want to take a photo anymore and came back to us. Dan, being amused by the whole situation, said, Let's sing something. In case there are some nearby animals, we'll scare them and leave the area. I nodded. It felt like a good idea to keep us safe from any stray dogs, or maybe even wolves. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could do that for a minute, then go back to the main road and call for a cab, I said. I don't know any Romanian songs, but I can be the judge on who's the best singer. The guys agreed on a song, and they started singing all at once. They were terrible. A bunch of untalented, drunk guys singing seemed so funny. I listened carefully to keep my promise and nominate one winner, when all of a sudden I hear a great singing voice. The voice was pure. It was music to my ears, and that's when it hit me and I got frozen. It was a girl's voice. A few seconds later, my friends heard it too, and stopped singing as they noticed one by one. But the voice kept singing. It was starting now to accelerate and change, the tone from a sweet one to an angry and fast-paced flow. The sounds were getting higher, and it seemed like it was coming from all around us. Now the forest was hit by a hard wind, waving all the trees, and the voice started to sound louder and louder. The song was now changed to what sounded like a Latin language incantation. The bushes around us started to move frantically, and the leaves were flying in the wind. This wind was blowing so hard now that it was hard to hear anything besides it, but the voice still as clear as before. Angelo fell on his knees with his head against his chest and started shouting, Nex adum, immars, libris, pondu nex, evio, enueve, narto, contio, zenesperito manus. A strong smell of rot appeared, just like the one I sensed on the deer, and it seemed like it was coming from him. The voice now started to shout the same thing as Angelo, and I need no invitation to get the hell out of here. I ran as fast as I could in the direction I thought we came from, barely seeing in front of me and hoping I wouldn't run into a tree. The guys followed me as I heard them running and screaming behind me. A feeling of cold and deep sleepiness took over me, but I had to fight it, to remain focused and get the fuck out of that forest as soon as possible. The voice was still everywhere, as loud as before, but the wind started to blow even more ravishing. I was practically running as fast as my body could and jumping over dead tree trunks, looking left and right to see if there's anything in the woods, but there was nothing. Nothing that can be seen, at least. I saw in front of around 50 meters, the tree line ending, and I knew I headed the right way, and I'm almost out. I looked behind and saw Miha around 5 meters behind me, and Dan Bogdan around 30 meters behind us, still running towards us. We're almost out, I screamed to the boys. A very loud crack sounded in front of us. The sound scared me and I tripped. I got back up in a few seconds and kept running. A large tree fell in front of me and just missed me by a few meters. It was a gigantic old tree, at least 300 years old, and it just broke in half. The voice now transformed into an even angrier one, and the tonality sounded like screeching wheels. By this moment, Dan and Bogdan reached us, and we continued to run. We were practically seeing the road by now. A few more seconds have passed, and we left the woods, reaching the main road. The voice was gone by now. The wind was not blowing any longer. The air felt normal again. I sat down on the road, heavily breathing. Miha took out his phone, opened the cab app, enabled his geolocation, and ordered a car. We sat in silence, waiting, and after 20 minutes, the cab arrived. We went inside and sat quietly for the whole drive. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I just didn't know what to say. When we arrived in town, we headed straight to the police and told them what happened, and that we left Angelo behind. Of course, they didn't believe us, but they went to investigate. The second day I saw on the news, 23-year-old man found dead on the Witch's Pond. The cause was a heart attack. My phone rang. It was Kevin, and I answered. Hi, Kev, what's up? Hi, man, I just landed in Bucharest, waiting for a cab to get me to the hotel. Can you please give me the address again? I lost it somehow. Yes, I'll send you a share location right away, Kev. Oh, I almost forgot. The phone exploded with static. I looked at my screen and it now displayed a phone number I didn't recognize. After a few seconds of static, I heard a very low voice, but couldn't understand anything. I put my phone on speakerphone and pressed the volume up to the max. At that moment I froze, and it said, Nex adum, immars, libris, pondu nex, evio, enueve, narto, contio, zenespirito manus. My earliest memory was being warned by my mother to never venture into dark woods behind our house after dark. And beware, only evil lies beyond the horizon. As I grew older, I questioned why the woods were so dangerous at night. Mother would never elaborate and simply insisted that it's best to remain ignorant. At night, I would gaze out my bedroom window at the dark trees that lay so close. I swear I'd see a shadow moving in the darkness, but perhaps it was only a deer. Early one morning, I was jolted from my sleep by screams. I looked out the window and saw a crowd of townspeople, hollering in agitation. At the edge of the forest, I watched in confusion as several townspeople came out of the woods, with the small corpse of my friend Jeremy draped over their shoulders. Fool, my mother chided me later that day. You ought to have known better not to go out in the woods after dark. She then turned to me with a painful expression, as if the death of your father wasn't enough. I glanced at the sole portrait of my father above my mantel, a small, slim man with wavy hair. He had been killed when I was just a baby. When I became a young man, my older cousin Marcus became the sheriff. Hungry with ambition, he sought to prove himself. I say we take up weapons and kill that murdering psycho who was terrorizing our town for 20 years. He shouted one night at our small town's bar. Many in attendance agreed that the time had come to seek vengeance for the dead. A hunting party was formed. We gathered at the edge of the woods, rifles held high, but I hesitated. My mother's warning rang in my ears. I couldn't do it. My cousin gave me a disappointed look and then marched in with the rest of the men. We waited by the edge of the woods all night, but the men never returned. At one time, I thought I heard a distant scream, but perhaps it was only the wind. Dawn came. The time had come. I and a few others ventured into the woods under the safety of daylight and soon returned, carrying the bodies of the slain men. Marcus' body was the last to be found. I collapsed when I found it butchered on the forest floor. That night, preparations were made for the mass funeral. The press arrived a day later, but answers were in short supply, and no one dared to search the woods at night. For days I sat in my house, boiling with anger. The bloody face of Marcus burned into my memory. Had I only gone with them, perhaps. The days turned to weeks. The full moon rose one night, and my rage boiled over. I grabbed my rifle and entered the woods. With only the light of the moon to guide me, I could barely see as I ventured deeper into the chilling darkness. I cursed myself for forgetting a flashlight in my fury. Nearly blind, I felt out with my hand, swiping helplessly for something to grab. And then I saw a light in the darkness. It was a small fire. I pushed forward and entered the clearing. Crouched by the fire, but somehow still shrouded in shadow, was my father. He gazed up to look at me, and his lips parted to show a row of jagged, blood-stained teeth. I've been waiting for you. Nobody is prepared for a snowstorm in July. My headlights tore through the night, illuminating the twists and turns of Highway 7 as I cut through the fast-falling snow. All around me I saw cars in the ditch. The twisted wreckage of sedans and minivans crumbled against the trees and guardrails. White-knuckled and panting, I turned a steep corner, the headlights dancing off the bright yellowed warning signs that accompanied the wooden guardrails. With sickening realization, I felt the front tire hit a patch of black ice, ripping control away from me, spinning me in helpless circles as I fought the steering wheel. A moment of sheer animalistic terror surged through me before my car came to a grinding halt, sideways, in the middle of the highway. I threw open the driver's side door and vomited into the snow, my hands still shaking, truth be told. I was safer in the middle of the highway than I was driving down it. I hadn't seen any non-wrecked cars on this road in hours. I struggled to regain my breath, the crisp cold air stinging at my raw throat. The snow had already completely covered my head and shoulders. I spat the taste of vomit out of my mouth and closed the car door. In the far distance, I could hear the beeping of a lone car alarm, nearly lost amidst the sound of roaring snowfall. Anger took me. Then I turned my gaze to my rearview mirror, with furrowed brow and narrowed eyes. "Fuck you," I said. Quiet, creaking laughter emanated from the trunk of my car, mixing with the sounds of the storm and the helpless beeping of the car alarm. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. I shoved my hand in my pocket of my jacket and pulled out a long red thread, so light that it floated in the air for a moment. I took both ends in my hand and looped the string over itself once, twice, a third time, until a knot had formed. The laughter stopped, and the snow seemed to let up a bit, though not by much. I took the thread in both hands again, staring into the back seat, unblinking. I slowly began to go through the motions of tying another knot. A whimper from the trunk. I turned my gaze to the road ahead. The snow had begun to let up even more. "That's more like it," I said, placing the string back into my jacket. "You'd do well to remember your place." Another whimper met my ears. I smiled, took my foot off the brake and straightened out, continuing my drive down Highway 7. It took about an hour before I reached my destination, a small opening in the woods to the left of the rural highway, only a few miles away from the nearby village. I turned my car down the wooded road, dirt and stone kicking up alongside the snow. I felt the panicked beating of my heart within my chest. Whatever facade of confidence I had mustered on the highway had slipped away. My eyes were wide, darting through the shadowy woods. The snow fell with malice. Every swipe of the windshield wipers was immediately met with a blanket of snow that obscured my vision. My breath caught in my throat. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A tall figure moving through the trees alongside me, keeping pace with my car without running. I did not look directly at it. I knew better than that. I doubled my speed. Soon after, the woods gave way to a small clearing in the forest. At the very edge of my headlights, I could see the silhouetted shape of dark structure. It was 2 stories tall but squat, shorter than it could have been. The structure was made of decaying, half-rotten logs with broken windows. Despite the storm, there was not a single speck of snow on the cottage. It simply stood, a rotting black obelisk among the sea of white. I felt my heart beat double, breath catching in my throat. With shaking hands, I reached under my seat, drawing out an old Browning high-point handgun. The metal was cold to the point of discomfort on my bare skin. Yet I still withdrew the magazine. Counting rounds, checked the chamber. Only 2 rounds left. In my left pocket, I had a flashlight. In the right, a small emerald tied with a red thread. I took a shaky breath and slowly opened the car door. Handgun at the ready. The headlights of my car lit the path towards the cottage. I flicked on the flashlight. Glancing around the woods, the hairs upon my neck shot up. There were evil things in the woods. I averted my eyes from them, not willing to meet their gaze. With shaking hand, I put the pistol under my left armpit and reached into my pocket, withdrawing the threaded emerald. I held it high above my head, pointing the flashlight towards it. I will pass through here, I said, eyes towards the ground. This is my right. I could feel a rumbling within my body, a primordial anger, cursing through the ground into my feet. I closed my eyes for a second, clenching the string of the emerald as tightly as I could. When I glanced up, the beasts were gone. Every part of my body wanted to collapse with relief. I could feel a warm tugging in the palm of my right hand, where the thread met it. I thrust my fist back into my pocket before holding my hand in the cold snow for a moment. I took the pistol back in my hand and turned to face the trunk of my car. It was open. Swearing, I spun around, the flashlight held high. There were no footprints in the snow. I glanced at the cottage. She was there, illuminated in the headlights, as the snow billowed all around. Long, thrashing black hair obscured her face. She wore an off-white hospital gown atop her gaunt frame. Her feet were not touching the ground. I squeaked a pathetic scream and shielded my clenched eyes with my right forearm. Even from here, I could hear her laughter. I placed the barrel of the handgun against my temple, my finger tightly gripping the trigger. A moment passed. The laughter did not stop. I kept my eyes closed. I knew better than to open them. I cocked back the hammer of the pistol, still aimed at my own skull. Slowly, steadily, I stepped forward, feeling for the car with my left hand. I could hear movement all around me, and yet I still left my eyes closed. I pawed at my right jacket pocket with my left hand, withdrawing the emerald. "You will let me pass," I shouted. "This is my right." I held the gem high above my head as I blindly stumbled forward through the snow. My teeth chattered incessantly from both fear and the ever-growing cold. God, the cold. It was as if every step I took shot ribbons of sharp air through my lungs. And then I heard the world stop. The rumbling of the forest beasts quieted. The laughter ceased. The roaring snowfall ended. And I felt the final flecks of white disappear from the night air. I opened my eyes. The witch's eyes glared into mine, her face close enough that I could smell the putrid stench coming from her breath. The red of her eyes seemed to glow as her breath caught in the cold air between us. She smiled at me, her teeth rotting and broken. There was death on her face. I wish I could express the true primordial fear that emanated through my soul at that moment. She felt it, her twisted smile growing even wider, inhumanly wide. In that moment, I felt as though her face would shred at the sight of her mouth, tearing the weak flesh away and exposing the blackened skull beneath. I lowered the handgun, dropped it in the snow. It was useless to me now. There was no way she would let me take the easy way out. I thought about the knotted red thread in my breast pocket, considered the power it would hold, but it was no use. That was hers. I had only one option then. My name is Jory Whitehall. I identify myself to you, as it is my obligation, I said, standing as tall as I could as the insane creature stared into my skull. I have held you unimpeded for 3 days and 3 nights. By every law, you must hold me for the same duration before casting me aside. The witch frowned. There was murder in her eyes. I glared at her. I am owed this. This is my right, as is known to you. A low growl escaped her lips. I felt a weight press against my insides. It was as if a boulder had been placed within my stomach. My feet grew weak under the power. A moment later, I was floating, drifting behind the witch as she slowly glided forward. The beams of my headlights grew weaker as she brought me to the dying cottage, until eventually the light left altogether. Sleep took me then. I woke on the first night, hidden away in a disgusting room of rotted wood and crawling insects, to the ground of hysterical screaming. The witch sat, knees to chest, rocking back and forth with red eyes glowing beneath her black hair. When she saw my eyes open, she howled a barbaric laughter, dragging her gaunt hands across her face. The second day was worse. Something was taking away my consciousness, and when I woke, I attempted to stand up. She was there, standing in the door frame, crooked and bent at the hip. There was no motion to her. Her eyes were locked on mine, but were unmoving. Even her hair stayed still, despite the breeze that drifted from the winter air. There was a glob of saliva hanging from her lips. I awoke in the morning on the third day. I was not chained. She was nowhere to be found. I blinked tired eyes, tried to rub away the sleep. I could not shake the grogginess out of my eyes. I dug my knuckle into the corner of my eyes. I felt the flakes of crusted sleep begin to fall away. My eyes opened for a moment, again showing me the miserable room. I closed them again with a yawn, opening them slowly in the morning light. The witch rushed at me from across the cottage, her face filling my entire field of view with a deafening scream. Her gaunt hands grasped my shoulders, claws digging into meat. Her horrible mouth opened wider than should have ever been possible. I reached for the thread. As soon as my skin touched it, her screaming grin instantly faltered into a flat, dead scowl. Her hands pulled back from me, and within a second she was on the other end of the room, standing with dark hair all around her. With shaking fingers, I tied another knot into the light red thread. The witch winced in pain, her glowing red eyes glaring at me through her tangled hair. Before she could move, I tied a second knot, and a third. With every movement of my fingers, the witch seemed to grow even more disoriented, her eyes scanning the room with no given target. A fourth knot, then a fifth. The witch fell to her knees. I drew the string tight and threw it before her. It landed at her knees, her entire body tensing up without motion. Her eyes slid up to meet mine, but she could not move. I withdrew the emerald from my right pocket and unraveled the thread, placed it around her neck as a pendant. Her eyes went cross, a long breath escaping her lips. I let go of the emerald gingerly, so as not to break the string. The witch knelt motionless upon the wooden floor. She could not see me anymore, could feel and sense nothing. She was trapped by her own weapon. I backed away from her, towards the door of the cottage, careful not to take my eyes away from her. It had to be 7 steps to the door. Any more was without protection. When my heel touched the frame of the door, I quickly turned my whole body and eyes away from her and gripped the doorknob. Die, the witch whispered. My breath caught within my throat. She should not be able to speak. I threw open the door and rushed into the snow, her hoarse voice slipping through the broken window. Die, the witch moaned. Die, 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 die. I moved quickly. It was near the midday hour in the forest, the time for man, not beast. But I knew I was not safe. I took a rusty nail from the rotting log and tore it across my forearm. Letting loose a wave of my own blood, I marked the entrance of the door with my blood, the window seals, the cellar door. When this was done, I coated my own palm in blood and placed it against the snow and further into the dirt below. I would not allow these things the potential to obstruct my designs. I returned to the car, popped the trunk where the witch had been staying. Inside there were sticks shaped lace with red thread. At the back of the trunk there was gasoline. I took it, poured it across the sides of the cottage. I looked through the front door. The witch was standing, walking towards me in slow motion as she fought the emerald. Her mouth was open wide, her lips stretching from the edges of her earlobes. I lit a match, ignited the gasoline. The snow began to melt as the cottage began to burn. I glanced around. Grotesquely tall furred beasts watched me from the distance. Standing on hooved hind legs, I averted my eyes. The sanctity of the midday hour was not as ensured as it once was. I opened the door of my car. Glancing back at the flaming cottage, the witch had made it to the door frame, still moving in slow motion. Like the logs of the structure, her legs had ignited in flame, and she screamed an unholy sound as the wood began to crack and collapse all around her. She had been strong, that one. I drove back down the lane as I came, keeping my eyes plastered on the road ahead. I did not look into the woods. Some time after, I turned right back onto Highway 7. The snow had melted. The grass was clear and green. I accelerated, driving faster. I was out of the proverbial woods. The car handled well. It was a shame I would have to burn it after all this. Witches of the forest had a habit of staying with you without certain precautions. As I turned a corner into the rural gas station, I pulled out my cell phone, took a call, gave them the news. They were pleased. They gave me a new set of coordinates, a few days' drive to the west. I paid the attendant, picked up a new jerry can of gasoline. With a sigh, I threw open the car door and sat down at the wheel, turned the ignition, and then, like so many other days, I took to the road.